Welcome to Silberman Law Firm's Weekly Docket, episode 50, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is December 27th, 2024, and I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host, and I'm also joined by Austin Black, my co-host who works in our Dallas office. And we've got a special show today. It's our New Year's show format. Austin, do you have any New Year's resolutions you want to tell us about?
There's a few probably, but the main one that I want to make sure that I get done is I want to take the topic, which is, it's about TOPIK, but it's the Korean proficiency test. It's administered by the Korean government. It's offered, the only place it's offered in Texas is Houston. So I'm going to have to go there towards the end of next year. But I want to take that and just see exactly what my level of proficiency is, because you can get like from level 1 to level 6. Level 6 is you're completely fluent in like a business capacity, and then level 1 is obviously much lower. It's you can talk with kids.
Interesting. There's your Korean trivia for you, for our listeners there, but that's not the essence of our show. Austin is a big Koreaphile, if that's a word, but we must move on to our New Year's show today. And we have some New Year's resolutions, and they're for small businesses, just regular people, for everyone. We've got some legal New Year's resolutions that we're going to be suggesting for people. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get it kicked off with resolution number 1. And this is for small business owners or any size businesses for that matter. And in our law firm, we get a lot of calls after damage has already been done, right? Because people call us up and they're like, hey, I'm getting sued, or hey, I've got this problem. And it really could have been solved if the person had a decent contract in that transaction. So this is going to sound overly used, and it's going to sound like we just want people to use lawyers. But, while yes, we want people to use us, use our law firm for certain. But here it is. If you're a business out there and you're using a repeated contract, like a repeated contract form in your business, or you're going to do a new contract and it's worth a lot, the contract has a material value, you really need to get that reviewed by an attorney. And just so important to do. We've got some examples here. One I've got is if you're a general contractor, for example, and you're doing the same renovation service over and over again with a real piece of real estate homeowner or other business owner, or you're building out a commercial space or whatever, and you're using that same contract. And if you've never had that reviewed by an attorney, or it's been a long time, get that reviewed by an attorney. That's a very important part of your business. Austin, have you had any sort of examples where clients have come to you and they've gotten into a bad contract, or anything you can think of?
Yeah, absolutely. Either with it being a business deal, where they come to us on the back end where it went sideways and certain provisions were not clarified in the contract that formed the substance of the deal. And then, like frequently in a renovation or remodel contracts, those are a big thing because people use change orders constantly to update that. And then how those change orders are approved isn't delineated in the base contract. And none of this is to say that we think any of you who've made your own contracts are dumb or anything of the sort. It's just that you very likely have not had the experience of seeing everything that can go wrong in these. And that's always where we're brought in, is when we see the things that can go wrong. So we can go ahead and catch that before it happens on your end. And even if you do get brought into litigation, hopefully it's much smoother and you can just move for a summary judgment based on the clear language of the contract. So
yeah, there's all kinds of examples we have. The biggest one I see is ambiguity in contracts. And usually a layperson will take out a document and they're doing a deal and they're gonna contract for something, right? For example, I just saw a contract. I'm gonna confess, it was actually my contract that I hired a group to remodel a house that I own. And the contract had paint and just paint the house. And we ended up getting into a dispute with the contractor about what he was supposed to paint. Yeah. And he said, no, I just wanted to paint the walls and the ceilings. Yeah. And the contract did not include painting the cabinets. So you got to be careful if you really need to be specific. So then after that dispute, I said, okay, fine, let's do a change order, right, for what you're going to paint. So I broke out the change order and just legal whipped the thing to death. And I was like, for this change order for X dollars, you agree to paint cabinets and any surface that's been touched, and you agree to present the home in make ready condition and where there's no rough surfaces that have been unpainted, right? Those are things that lawyers can do. And when you write like a lawyer, you really are going to contract specifically for something. So very important to not have any ambiguous language. Another common example we see is operating agreements with a new venture. A lot of people get into a new business. Hey, you get into a deal with a buddy. Let's go do a new business. And you think, all right, you're just going to form the thing with the state. You're not going to use a lawyer, which is fine. But your operating agreement, people don't know, is a contract between you and the other owners of the LLC, right? So you have to specify. And some of the most important things we see is, let's say you're going to start, just staying in the theme of construction, you're going to start a construction company. But maybe you already own a construction company. So your operating agreement needs to say that the limited purpose of this new construction company is to operate somewhere else with specifics. And then you're going to need to, let's say you want to get out of the venture. You need to have a customized withdrawal provision. You can't, people think they just form an LLC and they just get to say, oh no, I'm done with it. Doesn't work like that. You need to specify dissolution. You need to specify withdrawal. Important to get attorneys to.
And there are default provisions in the business code that take hold if you don't have one of those things, but they're usually not super helpful for you. For instance, if we frequently do have people come to us where they're just like two people who started an LLC together and they don't have an operating agreement about how to dissolve it, and they're in a conflict where they can't decide like how much one person is supposed to pay out the other, and they want to dissolve it, but neither of them can agree how to do it. You have to actually open up a lawsuit to do that. And it's really a pain in the butt. So it's just much better idea to have those things already worked out, because I'm sure you guys are great and happy and it's all peaches and cream like at the very beginning, but it probably won't be when it's ending.
Yeah, for certain. So here's the question. When is it not that important to have a lawyer look at a contract? Because there are times where it's just not worth the legal fees. So if you're doing a deal or a transaction and it's not something you do over and over again, but it's a one-off and it's not a material value and you can stomach the loss of the contract, probably not necessary to go and pay a lawyer for that deal. Now, the question is, what's a material value, right? It's different for everybody. If you're doing some random deal and you're a general contractor, I don't know why we're talking about general contractors, but we're just talking about general contractors today. So if you're a GC and you're doing a $2,000 project and it's a small project or something like that, and maybe you don't have the right form, whatever you do, the guy owes you $2,000, you do it on a handshake deal. That's probably okay. It's not worth paying a lawyer a couple hours of work, $600, $700, $800 for a $2,000 contract. The materiality just isn't there. So you don't need to use a contract every time. Or if you have to have this service and the other side isn't going to negotiate, right? We talk about the contracts of adhesion.
If you come to us with a cellular contract with AT&T and you say, hey, I really want to negotiate this contract, you can pay me like hours of work to look over that if you really want, and I'll send AT&T a list of my demands. I can tell you they're going to get ignored and they really don't care.
Right. Contracts that you cannot change, that are boilerplate, that were the services you have to have. You need electricity, okay, or you need water. So or you need certain utilities sometimes. Yeah. If you like to drink or bathe or whatever you do.
Or live.
So you need these services and you can't, it's not worth paying an attorney to, one that's more common. If you're buying a new home and let's say you're using a gigantic builder like KB Homes or something, you're not KB Homes or DR Horton or whatever. They're not going to negotiate your home contract that you're buying. Now, you could pay us, and some people do, you could pay us just so you understand the terms and you know what your obligations are, you know what you're getting into, but don't expect to do back and forth on those types of contracts with gigantic builders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, custom homes, completely different situation, right? So custom home builders will negotiate and should be negotiated. So,
and yes, and there will be provisions in there that you absolutely want to take out that they don't expect you to agree to if you have an attorney look at them.
Yeah. All right, moving right along, resolution number 2. This one's for everyone, not just a business owner, but just regular people, or maybe not everybody, but for a lot of people, if you have children from a previous relationship, you need to have a will. It's a good idea for everybody to have a will, but especially if you have children from a previous relationship.
Unless you hate those children. Unless you hate those children, then maybe it's okay to not. Well, no, actually, even in that scenario, you want to, because you'd want to make sure you exclude them, right?
I thought you were saying, okay, so you were married and you had children with your first wife. I'm just an example.
Yes.
And then you don't like those children, married a second woman, and decided not to do a will, and then died. And because you dislike your children, you want your children to fight it out in probate court with your second wife. That's why I thought you were saying.
I was saying because default, according to intestacy, they would receive some, right? If you make sure they know that they don't get it and they have no chance in probate court, right?
I think that would be too good for them.
Too good. Okay, you want them to fight, yeah.
You want them to fight it out in probate court, so where they spend all the money on attorney's fees and then everybody's left with nothing anyway.
Yeah, and your estate $500 anyways. It's great, yeah.
Right, that's a good idea. All right, now, but seriously, getting back to this, in all seriousness, it's a very common situation where you had children from your first marriage, you get married again, maybe probably shortly after your first marriage. Young people typically do. They got married the first time. They were young. They were in love. It didn't work out for whatever reason. They promptly get married a year or two later or soon after. Then they're married to second wife for 30 or 40, 50 years, but they had children with the first wife, possibly, potentially, not always. And then they don't have a will, and then they die, and then the second wife calls us up and says, okay, now I need to get the title to the house cleared over to my name. And Austin, you have to tell them what usually?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. You can get a portion of it transferred to your name, but if you're wanting the entire thing transferred to your name, I really hope you have a good relationship with those other children.
Because the children, if you have children, if you don't have a will, Texas makes a will for you.
Yes.
So if you have children from a previous relationship, your community property, so if you bought this house or whatever you acquired with your second wife, is going to go, much of it will go to your children. And especially the house is the common one we see because they bought a house together, paid it off, and the spouse just thinks, oh, it's automatically mine. Not if your husband didn't have a will. You need to have a will, and you need to specify that you want your spouse to get everything. And that way, you're not, if that's what you want. The big takeaway here, okay, is if you have children from a previous relationship, you need to have a will, because if you don't, something is likely going to happen that you don't want to happen. So the spouse is going to get 50%, your children will get 50%, and what you probably want is your children to get some specific kind of gifts. But your spouse that you've been married to for a long time, you probably want her to get the house. That's usually what we see. Not always, but that's usually what we see. Have a will. It's very important, super important to have a will. That brings us to our next resolution, New Year's resolution. We've got number 3. This one's for everyone as well, but especially small business owners. We're talking about insurance. Now, this normally is not like the most exciting thing in the world, but I think I've got something that might help you specifically, Austin, just because I know.
Specifically, okay.
Yeah. Do you still drive like a really old car?
I do, yeah.
Do you have full coverage on it, or do you just have the minimum liability?
It's not minimum, but I do have liability insurance to make sure that if I hit someone that.
So do you have collision though? If the car were to be, or like hail damage, if the car were to get hailed, do you know if like you'll get reimbursed for that?
For my car?
Yeah, for your car.
No. If my car gets a bit of hail damage on it, the cost to fix it would probably be more than the car. So yeah. No.
So Austin's a lawyer and a very reasonably thinking person. So that's the smart decision. That point illustrates, though, review your insurance policies. We're talking about reviewing your insurance policies and knowing what is covered and what's not covered and really what you need. And especially small business owners or business owners, period, because you have all these additional business policies. And a lot of people don't realize the whole name and the game of insurance and the business model of insurance is to collect premiums and not pay out claims. And the way they do that is they sell people policies and they limit risk through exclusion. So almost all insurance policies in Texas are like, here's your policy to cover your home or your auto or whatever. But by the way, here's all the exclusions. Yeah. And the meat and the analysis of any kind of policy is what it's excluding, not what's covered.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that. And this is why the resolution needs to be, as terrible and miserable as it's going to be, whip out your insurance policy. And it's going to be like 20, 30, 40, 50 pages. It's going to seem overwhelming. But if you feel overwhelmed, just scroll to the back, all right? Or flip to the back and read the exclusions in the policy and know what's not being covered, and ask yourself, now that you understand what's not being covered, do you still feel like it's a good value paying all the money for the insurance?
Yeah.
And it may or may not be. So
yeah. And if after you do that, you feel an urge to go 3D print a gun, refrain.
Oh my God. We may have to edit that one out. That may be too soon. So.
I don't think it's too soon.
Okay. That may be too soon.
I'm saying don't do it. I'm not saying to do it.
No, don't do it.
I'm not one of the people over here praising the guy. I'm just saying, if you feel the urge after reviewing your insurance policy, because you may, don't do it. Don't do it.
That's a Luigi Mangione reference. And now, just by the virtue of saying his name, I'm hungry for Italian food. Yeah. All right. So here's a good example, a bit of a ripoff. Cyber fraud insurance. Austin, our firm previously carried cyber fraud insurance. And what this is to cover, right, for businesses, law firms, title companies, really realtors, all kinds of businesses where money is being moved around. And that's the nature of business, right? So it's a fairly applicable type of insurance.
Yeah.
The stuff is super expensive and it's about useless. And I didn't realize that. I paid for it for 2 years until I finally said, wait a minute, this is really, what was it was like, I learned that it was capped at $250,000. Mm-hmm. So I was only getting $250,000 of insurance. So our title company or our law firm, Austin, we routinely move millions of dollars around.
Yeah.
So if we have cyber fraud occur, and this is where like somebody in Southeast Asia or somebody in Nigeria or West Africa pretends to be, we have an email address compromised, or tricks one of our administrative people into wiring money somewhere, impersonation fraud, it's supposed to cover stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if your policy is capped at $250,000, and we were paying like $5 to $10,000 for that policy, it's not an insignificant. When you think about it, you're paying $10,000 for $250,000 of coverage. It's really a lot of money. But if you're trying to protect $1 million, if you're routinely wiring millions of dollars, let's say you're a realtor and you're selling $1 million homes out there, and you're capped at $250,000, that's like trying to use an umbrella to protect yourself in a hurricane.
Yeah.
It's just useless.
Probably a bad idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Just so it's, and here's on top of it, you talk about insurance companies not wanting to pay claims. They make you, just to get if you had a claim, you have to demonstrate like all this ridiculous stuff to get paid. Like you have to have a cybersecurity plan in place. You have to make your employees use multi-factor authentication.
Specifically for the cyber fraud insurance.
Yeah, for the cyber fraud. And all very good ideas, but
the Silberman law firm has a very robust cybersecurity plan.
We do. I really hope like our big title company underwriters that we're using are not listening to this podcast. But if you are, we do have a cybersecurity plan in place. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what Austin and I already talked about: auto insurance.
Yeah.
It's ridiculously expensive. Did you know there's been like a 20 to 30% auto insurance increase?
Trust me, I know. Yes.
It is painful. And this is what Austin was talking about. If you drive an old hoopty, okay, you probably don't need collision.
Yeah.
And the example, I collect these old kind of luxury cars that it's a weird kind of collection. Most guys try to collect Ferraris and really cool cars. I collect like old. So I bought it like a 2011 Mercedes S550 for $15,000, right?
Yeah.
And the collision on that is so ridiculously expensive because it's expensive to fix German cars. So if something happens, it's just a loss. I'm not going to pay $6,000 a year to insure a car that's worth $15,000, right? And some of the stuff, do you really need it? Accident forgiveness? Do you need rental car replacement? Could you take an Uber for 2 or 3 days? You just need to start thinking about all these additional premiums that you're paying and asking yourself, is it valid?
What do you need? What do you need for your needs?
All right, next example we've got on the insurance for home insurance. Austin, I know you're not a homeowner, but that also has gotten crazy expensive. So 23% increase in 1 year in Texas.
Yeah.
So inflation's only running at 3% unless you own a home or unless you own a car. Yeah. It's just crazy. Biggest insurance increase in the country. In Texas, you need to start thinking about, and this is not a lot of people, right? But if you happen to actually own your home and not have a lien on it, and you live in a really old home and most of the value's in the lot, you probably need to start thinking about not having insurance. The biggest risk to you, like Austin, I know you're sitting in a home right now. You told me it's around the holidays, so Austin's hanging out at his parents' house. The biggest risk is when your parents are out of town and you say you're there watching the dog or whatever, the house catches on fire. That's really the biggest risk.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're sitting in that house, I don't know if you're sleeping there, it's much less likely to catch on fire and have a total loss. Yeah. Most of the time, homes that catch on fire and have a total loss is usually because someone's not there for extended period of times. That's why the premiums are higher on vacant homes. Makes sense. If you know your home all the time, the biggest risk is your total loss is fire. Yeah. We need to start thinking about some other things we can do to limit that risk with some smart alarms and sprinkler systems and all that. We're getting to that point in Texas. Now, the biggest risk to the insurer, Austin, the company offering the home insurance, is not actually fire because it's such a small percentage of their loss. Yeah. Like their number one loss, I think, is all the stupid hail damage and wind damage from storms, right? Yeah. Replacing roofs. That's why there's this you really need to get into the policy details on your roof coverage. Yeah. Because the roof stuff is now they're saying like you don't get full replacement costs for your roof. That's like a special endorsement you need to get. They just want to pay you for the value of life left on your roof. So they're doing everything they can. And you're talking about they're increasing your deductibles. What's your deductible? What kind of roof do you have? If you've got a brand new composition shingle roof that you just replaced, those are pretty resistant to like hail and windstorms now. You may think about really what the value, you can increase your deductible, right? Maybe save a little money there, but it's getting so expensive in Texas. A lot of people are starting, as crazy as it sounds, because your home is your biggest asset and it doesn't work for everybody. But a lot of people are starting to think about self-insuring their home in the right situation. And then do you have some other things that aren't covered in a list of common exclusions that people don't know about? Yeah. And what do you have there?
Mold is one. Another big one is flooding of the house. And then, which you definitely need in Houston. And then foundation earth movement.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I don't think you can get a policy that covers mold in Texas.
Probably not.
So a lot of people, you just need to know, there's nothing you can do about it, but you just need to know that mold is not covered. Fungus is not covered. Okay. Yeah. Foundation in Houston, we have shifting soil all the time. That's not going to be covered. Yeah. And flood, this is a big one. People think, oh, my insurance policy covers flood. It doesn't. And flood is basically a federal government thing. It's a FEMA thing. Yeah. And that has got it very expensive. And if you're near the coast, it's extremely costly. And it's capped at $250,000. So yeah, you need to know where your home is. We have floodplains, whether you're in a 100-year floodplain, 500-year floodplain. And do you need flood? But yeah, your insurance policies, insurance companies are not your friend. Okay. Despite all these commercials that you say about you're in good hands or whatever, we're there for you, all these heartwarming. They are in the business of minimizing claim payments and collecting premiums. So you need to know your policy and you need to figure out what risk makes sense, because insurance is really just about offsetting risk, right? Okay, what's our final, let's bring this to our final resolution. What is our final resolution for people, Austin?
Don't be in court. Stay out of it.
But that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt our billing, I think, if people take us up on that.
I don't think so. At least not for the cases I sign up. My first thing is always telling people to try to avoid court if they're not in it yet. If you can get an issue resolved outside of court, that's almost always your best option. Even there are a lot of times where if sending a demand letter didn't suffice for actually getting a resolution to whatever issue is there, then even drafting up like a detailed and aggressive petition and sending that over as a follow-up and say, hey, this is going to be filed on this date if we don't reach some sort of a settlement, can also keep you out of court, right? It'll be more expensive on the front end, having an attorney do that, but it'll be more expensive than just writing a demand letter. But it'll keep you out of court. And you don't have to, if you're out of court and you make a settlement there, that's binding contract, right? If they pay that, you're done. You don't have to go through more legal fees. And if you go to court and you win in court, then you have to go to collect, and because the judge doesn't have a pot of gold behind, he or she is not a leprechaun, and so they can't just give you whatever you've been awarded, including your attorney's fees, if you get that up to the judge's discretion. So it's just not a quick fix. If you have to go to litigation, do it. Obviously, we're here; we do it all the time, but it should always be the last resort. So
yeah. The only people that make money in court are the lawyers, and that's an old saying, but it's really true. You need to be, if you're going to file a lawsuit, initiate a lawsuit, to me, it almost needs to, for a small business, it almost needs to be just like a make or break the company thing.
Yeah.
It's just, even our clients that win in a lawsuit don't really feel like they win, because they've paid the lawyers. And it's not like we have these super high billable rates, okay?
In fact, we don't.
No. Yeah. It's just, lawyers are expensive. And you go through a year and a half of litigation and you're paying lawyer fees. And even if you win, people just don't feel like they've won, even if because they've paid the lawyers so much. And Austin, I've got a great case on this. And this is a very famous case. You probably know it. I'm going to mispronounce it, but it's Ramos Venture versus UT Southwestern.
Yeah.
And this was actually a landlord-tenant commercial lease case, right? But it's all about attorney's fees. And this case illustrates this point just so well. I'm not going to belabor the details of the case or anything like that, but they were trying to figure out what reasonable attorney's fees is. And some people looked at the court transcript on it. And don't quote me on the exact number, but it was something like they spent $1 million in attorney's fees, $1 million. And the trial court judge was asking them, well, how much was the amount in controversy again? And they said I think $400,000 was the amount in controversy, but they ended up spending $1 million on legal fees. And it was just crazy. And the judge held his tongue, to that judge's credit, that trial court's judge's credit. But you can read into the transcript just what the judge really thought about how crazy that was.
Yeah.
Now, those are really big numbers. And if you're just a small business owner out there and you think, I'll never have those big numbers, it's about materiality. And we see all the time, usually we're on the opposite side of this, Austin, cases where someone has filed a lawsuit against our client and it's $10,000 in controversy.
Yeah.
And we can't get them to settle, and they end up spending $50,000 on attorney's fees.
Yeah.
So those multiples still exist, and on a smaller level, it's just as painful. It's oftentimes more painful because the money is more real to regular business owners. Stay out of court. That's probably the biggest New Year's resolution we can advice or tip or whatever you want to call it to people out there. Nobody wins in court, and we have some very litigious clients, and I have lots of litigious friends. It's like they keep coming back for more and more pain. So I just tell them flat out, I'm like, hey, my kids have to eat, but I appreciate you paying the bills and all that. But we really do try to be honest lawyers and keep people from hurting themselves and doing damage, and staying out of court is a big part of that. So that brings our New Year's show to a close. So Next show will be released in the new year.
You asked me from one of my New Year's resolutions, but I didn't ask you for one of yours. What's one of yours?
Oh gosh, what's one of my New Year's resolutions? Okay, here's what I was thinking about. I am going to be more. I'm going to try to be more understanding and empathetic to people in general. That's my co-hosts. That's the employees that work for me. That's my family. I am working on empathy. At the end of 2025, Austin, I'm going to be the most empathetic person that you.
Okay. That is an ambitious goal. I think maybe you should try to take the Korean proficiency exam with me instead.
I probably, Austin's saying I have a better chance of learning Korean in a year than I do of developing empathy. Austin, that hit me really where it hurt. And on that note, I'm bringing this show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Austin Black has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. Nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. That's info@silblawfirm.com. Tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.